Most companies build machines for ideal conditions. Volvo built machines for the places where everything else breaks down. Arctic temperatures, deep mines, demolition sites, war-torn roads, the kind of environments that destroy ordinary equipment in days. And somehow, a company from one of the smallest industrial nations on Earth became one of the most trusted names in heavy machinery on the planet. This is not just the story of a car brand, this is the story of a Swedish engineering obsession that changed how the world builds itself. Every major construction project you have ever seen, a highway cutting through a mountain, a harbour being dredged, a skyscraper foundation being dug, required machines. Enormous, powerful, reliable machines. Machines that could work 18 hours a day, in rain, mud, extreme cold, extreme heat, and come back the next morning ready to do it again. Building those machines is one of the hardest engineering challenges in the world, and for decades, one company from Sweden kept showing up at the hardest job sites on Earth and keeping its machines running when others had already given up. Volvo Construction Equipment, known today simply as Volvo CE, but the story of how a Swedish car company became a global construction machine powerhouse is far more complicated and far more interesting than most people realize. It involves a near collapse, a radical reinvention, and a series of engineering decisions that redefined what heavy equipment could actually do. So how did it happen? To understand Volvo, you first have to understand Sweden. In the early 20th century, Sweden was not an obvious candidate for global industrial dominance. It was a small country, cold, geographically isolated from the major industrial centers of Europe, with a population a fraction of Germany, Britain, or France. But Sweden had something those countries sometimes lacked: necessity. The Swedish landscape is brutal: thick forests, rocky ground, long winters, short building seasons. If you wanted to build roads, railways, mines, or ports in Sweden, you needed machines that could handle conditions that would stop ordinary equipment cold. Swedish engineers did not have the luxury of building for ideal conditions. They built for the worst ones. That engineering culture, precise, pragmatic, over-engineered for reliability, became the foundation of what Volvo would eventually become. The Volvo Group was founded in 1927, initially as a car manufacturer spun out of the Swedish ball-bearing company SKF. The name Volvo comes from Latin. It means I roll. Cars came first, but the engineering philosophy that made Volvo cars exceptionally safe and durable was the same philosophy that would later make Volvo machines exceptionally tough. And it would take decades and several major strategic decisions before that potential was fully realized. The move into construction equipment did not happen overnight. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Sweden was rebuilding roads, infrastructure, housing. The post-war construction boom created massive demand for heavy equipment. Volvo saw the opportunity. In the early 1950s, Volvo began developing construction machines under a brand called Volvo BM, standing for Boliden Merkantil, a Swedish agricultural and industrial machinery company that Volvo acquired. Wheel loaders, articulated haulers, graders. These were not glamorous machines. They were workhorses, built to move earth, carry loads, and keep running through whatever Scandinavia could throw at them. But here is where Volvo made a decision that would define the company for generations. Instead of copying what American and German manufacturers were already building, and they were the global leaders at the time, Volvo's engineers went in a different direction. They focused on the operator. While competitors were focused primarily on power and payload, Volvo began investing heavily in cab design, operator comfort, and visibility. The reasoning was simple but counterintuitive. A machine that exhausts its operator in 6 hours is less productive than a machine that keeps its operator comfortable and effective for 12. Ergonomics as engineering, safety as performance. It was a philosophy borrowed directly from the car division, where Volvo had already pioneered the 3-point seatbelt and applied to the most demanding job sites on Earth. In 1966, Volvo BM introduced something that would change off-road hauling forever: the world's first true articulated hauler designed for construction use. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of a rigid frame, which transmitted every bump and vibration directly into the load and the machine, the hauler was built in 2 sections connected by a pivot joint in the middle. The front steered, the rear followed. The machine could bend through its center. On flat paved ground, this made little difference. On steep slopes, deep mud, loose gravel, and uneven terrain, it was revolutionary. An articulated hauler could go where conventional dump trucks could not. It distributed weight more effectively. It was far less likely to tip. and it kept moving in conditions that would have stopped a rigid frame machine completely. The mining industry noticed immediately, the forestry industry noticed, the quarrying industry noticed, and gradually, so did construction companies around the world. Today, the articulated hauler is a standard piece of equipment on major construction and mining sites globally. Volvo did not invent the concept entirely, but it was among the first to develop it into a practical, commercially successful machine. That single product line helped establish Volvo as a serious global player in heavy equipment, not just a Scandinavian manufacturer with good engineering credentials. By the 1980s, Volvo construction equipment was growing, but the global heavy equipment market was becoming intensely competitive. Caterpillar, Komatsu, Liebherr, John Deere. These were the giants, and they had far larger production volumes, larger dealer networks, and in some cases, far deeper pockets. Volvo needed to scale. In 1998, Volvo made one of the most significant acquisitions in the history of the heavy equipment industry. It purchased Samsung Heavy Industries' construction equipment division. Samsung, yes, the electronics company, had been manufacturing construction equipment in South Korea, primarily excavators, since the 1970s, and they were good at it. Korean-built excavators were tough, competitive, and priced aggressively. The deal gave Volvo something it had been missing, a world-class excavator. Up to that point, Volvo's excavator lineup had been modest compared to its wheel loaders and haulers. The Samsung acquisition changed that almost overnight. Suddenly Volvo had manufacturing capacity in Asia, a competitive excavator range, and access to one of the fastest-growing construction markets in the world. It was a turning point. Within a few years, Volvo CE had transformed from a strong regional player into a genuine global top 5 construction equipment manufacturer. What separates Volvo from many of its competitors is not just size, it is where Volvo's machines are trusted to work. In northern Scandinavia and Canada, Volvo articulated haulers operate in temperatures that drop to -40 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, hydraulic fluid thickens, steel becomes brittle, seals crack, electronics fail. Volvo engineers these machines to start, run, and perform reliably in those conditions, because their customers have no other option. When you are running a mine above the Arctic Circle, you cannot wait for the temperature to rise. In underground mines, Volvo's machines work in spaces with almost no room to maneuver, breathing recycled air, carrying loads through tunnels barely wide enough to fit the machine. Every system has to work, every time. In dense urban demolition sites, Volvo excavators work within meters of occupied buildings, carefully dismantling structures that could collapse unpredictably, precision under pressure, and in some of the most remote places on Earth. Road construction projects cutting through African rainforests, mining operations in the Australian outback. Volvo machines operate weeks or months from the nearest service centre. When a machine breaks down at a remote site, it does not just cost money, it can cost the entire project its schedule. Reliability is not a marketing claim for Volvo, it is an engineering requirement. But here is where the Volvo story takes its most unexpected turn. In an industry defined by diesel power, enormous engines, massive fuel consumption, clouds of exhaust, Volvo construction equipment made a decision that shocked many in the industry. It went electric, early. In 2020, Volvo CE launched its first electric compact machines commercially. Compact machines, yes, but the implications were enormous. Construction sites in tunnels, urban areas, and enclosed spaces had always faced serious challenges with diesel exhaust. Ventilation costs were enormous, health regulations were tightening, and as cities pushed back against construction noise and pollution, contractors were under increasing pressure to find alternatives. Volvo's electric machines offered something diesel never could: zero exhaust, dramatically reduced noise, lower total operating costs over the machine's lifetime. The industry response was skeptical at first. Construction is a conservative industry. Contractors buy machines that work. They do not experiment with new technology on a job site where delays cost thousands per day. But Volvo had anticipated that skepticism. The company invested heavily in battery technology, charging infrastructure, and, critically, improving the machine's performance in real working conditions before promoting them aggressively. By the mid-2020s, Volvo CE's electric lineup had expanded significantly, and major contractors across Europe were integrating electric machines into their fleets. It was not a revolution that happened overnight, but it was a revolution that Volvo had started and was determined to finish. Today, Volvo construction equipment sits at a crossroads that every major heavy equipment manufacturer faces. The machines are more capable than ever, more efficient, cleaner, safer. But the industry is changing faster than at any point in its history. Volvo has been testing autonomous haulers, machines that operate without a human driver, at quarry and mining sites. The technology works. The question is how fast the industry adopts it, and what it means for the operators whose livelihoods depend on driving those machines. Every modern Volvo machine streams data continuously: fuel consumption, engine hours, fault codes, location. Fleet managers can monitor hundreds of machines from a single screen, scheduling maintenance before breakdowns happen. It is extraordinarily efficient. It also means that Volvo, like John Deere, like Caterpillar, knows more about how its machines are being used than the contractors who own them. Data as product, connectivity as competitive advantage. The machine is no longer just a machine. It is a data point in a global network. Whether that is progress or something more complicated depends entirely on who you ask. Volvo Construction Equipment began as a side project of a car company in a small, cold country that most of the world barely noticed. It survived by building machines tough enough for the conditions that broke everything else. It grew by making engineering decisions that competitors thought were unnecessary: operator comfort, articulated frames, electric drivetrains, until those decisions became industry standards. And it expanded from Scandinavia to every continent on Earth by earning trust the only way trust can actually be earned: by showing up. In the cold, in the mud, in the dark, and keeping the machines running. Volvo did not build machines for the easy jobs. It built machines for the jobs that nobody else wanted to take. And that is exactly why the world kept calling. The harshest jobs on Earth do not wait for ideal conditions. Neither does Volvo.